Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the Shapeshifter Lab here in Brooklyn, New York. Tonight, I'm going to introduce you to a brand new, fresh talent to jazz music. And this tenor saxophonist by the name of Matthew Silberman has a dynamic album, which you should really pick up, called Questionable Creatures. And what he's doing is he's doing something that a lot of the artists of the 1980s, and I'm talking about of the MTV era, ranging from Peter Gabriel to the Talking Heads to Laurie Anderson, they took video and art and meshed it with live music, which he's doing this evening. In fact, Matthew has two dynamic music videos which he's produced and had directed for two of the compositions on this latest CD. The Los Angeles, California native and I sat down earlier. We talked about the concept of this record and how he's been able to take jazz and fuse it with live film, as well as talk about him growing up in Los Angeles and getting exposed to jazz music. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of Mr. Matthew Silberman live here at the Shapeshifter Lab here in Brooklyn, New York. Congratulations on your CD, and what I want to start off by is that you've got a lot going on this disc. One, you're telling the story of an explorer in all the different cities that you've traveled, but you also have a visual art thing going also as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been really influenced by different painters, different art. Like, obviously, if you look at the cover of the CD, Questionable Creatures, it's very inspired by Dali, Salvador Dali, but you know, Basquiat is one of my main influences, and Kandinsky, what's his name, Cy Twombly, lots of different painters, and I've drawn a lot from visual imagery and the music. One of the songs on the album was inspired by a painter and writer named Brian Geisen, so it's just something I've always been attracted to, and I thought, you know, I mean, to me the music is just kind of one part of who I am, I guess, so I just want to express whatever I can and, you know, make the cover art tell part of the story as well, you know.
You know, the music is strong too. In fact, what you have in your group, you have two guitarists in your band, and this is kind of different also, because when you think of a quartet, quintet, you think of bass, drum, piano, but you've gone against the grain on this.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was I was actually thinking about that sort of classic model of, you know, tenor, trumpet, piano, bass, drums, and these two guitar players were the exact two I had in mind. It wasn't like I just thought I want two guitars, period. I thought, you know, just from playing a lot with them and knowing who they are as musicians, you know, I thought Greg plays almost like a horn player. He's got this really kind of liquid tone and you know, plays really melodically. I thought that could almost be like the trumpet or complement to my tenor. And then Ryan plays with so much space and so much texture and, you know, kind of weaves around everything that's going on. I thought it would be kind of, he could be sort of the piano or the, you know, the comping instrument, if you would. So some of it was drawn from that, but then also I've listened to so much different rock bands, you know, Blonde Redhead, Radiohead, Sonic Youth, just different bands that were really influential to me, especially when we formed the band 5 years ago. So it was kind of just something I always wanted to try, and it worked great. So I thought, all right, this is what I want to record, you know.
The whole concept of visual art, you know, is not new to music. I mean, we think of Andy Warhol, we think of Laurie Anderson, we think of Peter Gabriel, we think of quite a few artists. Even Prince had kind of dived into it a little bit. How hard is it to bring the visual to the music and the music to the visual?
For me, it seems pretty easy. I mean, it's just something that I kind of do naturally, I guess. I don't really think too much about it. You know, for the music videos, that was something I always wanted to make. You know, I think growing up, it's just a product of MTV in some respect. I always wanted to incorporate my music with visual imagery and tell stories that way as well. So the two music videos we made was just kind of a natural extension of that. But in terms of the art, I mean, I guess it's just something that kind of always went together to me, you know. Like I go to a lot of museums to get inspiration and to check out what people are doing, and you know, that was something that always inspired me and kind of gave me new ideas for my own music. So the two always seem to go together for me, but I don't know, it just seems natural, you know. It's all expression anyway, you know. It's like one form is in visual, one form is in sound, but it's just humans trying to convey ideas to other humans, you know, so.
I understand that you were traveling on this record, and each particular song and composition is from a perspective of a traveler. Explain this.
Well, you know, some of the songs invoke certain kind of places or characters in my life. You know, Mrs. Heimoff, the second song on the album, is definitely representative of this woman who, growing up in L.A., she was sat at the end of the row of the synagogue I grew up going to. So she was this big, vivacious Bulgarian woman, you know, one of the people that when she kisses you on the cheek, she almost inhales you. And she had a lot of life force, you know, just like a lot of, I don't know, a lot of chutzpah, as they would say. And so one day I was just kind of thinking about her randomly, and then I got this melody stuck in my head. So I went down to the piano, and, you know, literally like an hour later, that song was just written. And then the song Dream Machine was basically about an exhibit that the New Museum on Bowery had. And it was this guy, Brian Geisen, who I'd never heard of at that point, and was blown away by his work, both his drawings, his paintings, but also he did a lot of wordplay, and I guess he was good friends with William S. Burroughs. So they would do all these cut-ups where they'd take 4-word phrases, 5-word phrases, mix them up, and I thought, why don't I apply that to music? So that was inspiration for that. And then the Pharaoh's Tomb is sort of like a homage in some respects to, the music came before the title in that one, honestly, but it's kind of, I imagine like a Spielberg epic movie, some explorer going through a pyramid in Egypt, looking for a tomb, looking for lost treasure, trying to get out of there. The song kind of goes in all these different places to mark different spots in the adventure, basically. So, but yeah, I mean, the whole album is really just different places, different characters, or creatures, so to speak, in my life that just came in and out. So, Goes to the Prairie also is sort of somewhat inspired by driving through the Midwest. I was actually driving once to my friend, great alto saxophone player Logan Richardson's wedding in Missouri, and I had to drive like 100 miles an hour to get there through these prairies and middle of nowhere, and just kind of, it's a very different vibe from growing up in LA, moving to New York. So that was another sort of story on there. But
what would you describe your music? Would you describe it visual jazz, or how would you hail credit your music?
That's a good question. I don't really know exactly. To me, it's just music. I mean, I guess visual jazz would be a good description. It's definitely inspired by visual imagery, and it's definitely something that I think projects sort of colors and ideas to the listener, but at the same time, it's got a lot of elements of rock, of hip hop, of classical music, just different things. So when I write music, I don't really think about genre or labeling it. I just write whatever sort of comes out naturally. So I think you can call it whatever you want as long as you listen to it,
You grew up in Los Angeles, and I understand that your mother's an opera singer.
Yeah, my mother is an opera singer and a vocal teacher. So since I was in utero, since she was pregnant with me, she's been taking me to concerts, to rehearsals, and growing up, that was like the soundtrack of the house, basically. different opera, different voices. Hear. I mean, she's a soprano, but I'd hear the whole range of the human instrument, and I think not really consciously, but subconsciously, that really influenced the way I play the saxophone. Trying to play with a big kind of operatic sound, and really just being around people that really learn to project and learn to, carry their sound through the whole room. That was a big influence, and so I think my whole concept of the tenor is definitely also conceived by the vocal tenor. Even seeing the three tenors, Pavarotti, Domingo, and Correas, that was a great show for me just to hear the capabilities of the voice. But yeah, I mean, she was always singing, always had people over doing rehearsals, doing lessons, so it's just a big part of growing up, that kind of sound, and such a passionate medium for the music, so I think that was also a part of it, just trying to project emotion and think about these different characters that people would play, so.
I understand your father had a very, very strong influence also. He's the one that introduced you to a man by Charlie Yardbird Parker. Yeah,
that was huge. I mean, I remember him telling me stories about some guy named Bird when I first started expressing interest in jazz, and I was like, Bird? Who's called Bird? And then when I was 13, I think it was, he bought me my first Charlie Parker CD, which was just a Verve compilation, and I listened to it, and it was like, there's something there, and then every time I listened to it, I got more and more into it, and I heard more and more. And I mean, really, 17 years later, that's still the case. I mean, every time I listen to him, I hear more depth, I hear more beauty, more genius, more soul. I mean, his music to me has everything, and that was when I started realizing this is what I want to do, I'd always played music. I started playing music when I was 6, but it was just a hobby. It was something that I enjoyed. I'd practice if I felt like it. I'd play when I felt like it. But once I got exposed to his music, it was over. That's what I wanted to do. I'd practice every day. I'd listen to his solos and try to learn licks, and then start learning the whole solos. And it's a huge influence. So, thanks to my dad for that. And he got me into Coltrane too. So.
Because, your formal background and your training, you studied privately with a gentleman who I profiled here on the Pace Report, Mr. Clayton, Jeff Clayton.
Yeah, Jeff is a great saxophone teacher, great saxophone player, and just great person. I mean, he was really, really warm and encouraging to me when I was in high school, starting to study with him. And I started with him my junior year of high school, and I was starting to figure out some things, but really he exposed me to how to learn to play this music, and the tradition of it, how people have learned throughout the ages. And I think one thing that's unfortunately lost these days is with the universities, with all the Ebersolds and these things, people don't learn actually the tradition of how you learn to play the music. And, it's an African tradition, it's an oral tradition. People would learn from learning from records, from learning to play people's solos, learning to play songs from records, getting together with other people and just teaching each other. It wasn't all these play-alongs. It wasn't, all these classes. The classes were on the bandstand and the jam session. And I think from him and just getting to go to different jam sessions in L.A. and getting to play with a lot of different people around there, I really started to understand what the music was. And, it wasn't that Ebersold my mom bought me unknowingly, So he was a huge influence, and I still talk to him sometimes. I saw his band play, saw the Clayton brothers play last year at Dizzy's. And they're, swinging their asses off. It's just they're ridiculous. So it was really great to see him and just reconnect, and hadn't gotten to see him physically in a while. But he's been really supportive, really encouraging. So that's been great.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at Shapeshifter here in Brooklyn, New York. I'd like to personally thank Mr. Matthew Silberman for his time, as well as the staff and management here at Shapeshifter here in Brooklyn, New York. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.